On behalf of Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, and all my colleagues at Teamwork Arts, welcome back to JLF's Brave New World. Our magazine partner for this series is The Week, journalism with a human touch. As part of JLF Brave New World Season 1 Redux, we present our second session, The Art of Stillness, Piku Iyer in conversation with Meru Gokhale. At a moment of overwhelming change, the master essayist and novelist Piku Iyer takes us into the heart of stillness and changelessness. In conversation with publisher Meru Gokhale, he shares the secrets of solitude and the learnings of silence so essential to survive our strange times.
Thank you, Sanjoy. I'm just so looking forward.
Selling author of Eat, Pray, Love, which has sold over 1 million copies worldwide and has been translated into over 46 languages, and several other international best-selling books of fiction and non-fiction. Her follow-up memoir to Eat, Pray, Love, Committed became an instant #1 bestseller. She has published 2 novels, Stern Men and The Signature of All Things, which is longlisted for the Bailey's Women's Prize for Fiction and shortlisted for the Welcome Book Prize. Avni Doshi was born in New Jersey. She has a BA and MA in art history and was a Charles Pig Fellow in 2014. Burnt Sugar, Girl in White Cotton is her first novel. It was longlisted for the Tata First Book Prize in 2019 and is on the Booker Prize longlist for 2020. As you are all aware, all our sessions are available on our Facebook page, JLF LitFest, and on our YouTube channel, Jaipur LitFest JLF. To follow our handles, JLF LitFest on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get notified on the upcoming sessions. And in case any of you drop off due to bandwidth issues, you can find us on our YouTube channel, Jaipur LitFest JLF. And of course, if we drop off, hang in there, we'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, from Eat, Pray, Love to City of Girls, Elizabeth Gilbert in conversation with Avni Doshi.
Hi, Liz. How are you?
Hi, Avni. It's been a while. How are you?
Oh, I know. It's good to see you. So the last time we were together in person, and it was in Jaipur, which was just so magical. But it seems like a lifetime ago. I don't know.
It was a very different world. We were sitting in a palace garden with peacocks all around us and moving through the crowds of, imagine a crowd moving through the crowds of everybody at the Jaipur Literary Festival. It was truly magical and enchanted. And I feel very lucky that I got to have that experience right before this happened. My travels ended. I went traveling for 3 months right before COVID, and boy, I'm really glad I did, because I don't know when such a thing will happen again. But it's beautiful to see your face again, and I hope you're well and that your family is well.
Yes, I'm really well. I'm really well. But I want to know how you've been. So where have you been sheltering?
Well, I own an old church out in the countryside of New Jersey, just about an hour from New York City. And it's been my shelter in place location for a decade and a half. So in a way, I've sort of been preparing for it. I have a little garden and I've got my own well, and the light is beautiful and it's very peaceful and very quiet. And as soon as all of this really escalated, it was pretty clear to me, like, go. Take your stuff, get out of New York City and go. So I've been out here for the last 2 months by myself. And for me, it's been a combination of contradictory feelings. There's the feeling of great public sorrow for the world, and for the people who have lost family members and lost jobs, and for the tremendous psychological uncertainty that so many people are suffering through right now, that I think is in a way the biggest cost of all of this, is the disturbance of mind that I know that people are going through, even if they haven't been affected by it financially or through the disease itself. It's a time of great emotional unsettling. So my thoughts are with everyone on that. But for me personally, it's been a beautiful, silent 2 months of rest and walking in nature, and going deeper and deeper into the experience of solitude. And it's been fascinating. So I have these two different sort of sides of me. One is, oh dear, this is terrible. And the other one is, well, for me, this is pretty nice. So that's where I've been at.
Yeah. I think, me as well as so many of your fans, I think we really look to you for, you always have a lot of really profound insights. And I think not only are they extremely meaningful, but they're also practical. You can often apply them to your everyday life. And so I was wondering if you have any practices or rituals that have really gotten you through the last 2 months that you can share that might be able to help people at this time.
Well, I can give you just a general idea that I've been using, and that I've been using kind of as a life raft. You hear a lot of conversation in the world right now about how difficult this period of isolation is for everybody. And that is undoubtedly true. And you'll often hear it said, humans are social animals. We're social animals. We need each other, and we need to work on trying to figure out ways to reach out to each other and stay in contact with each other and be close with each other. And that is also, without a doubt, 100% true. But we are not only social animals. We are a very complicated species. We have a lot of facets. We are also spiritual animals. And every spiritual tradition in the history of the entire world advises that at some point in your life, you should go be by yourself, and you should cut yourself away from the world and its distractions and its temptations and its beauties and its deliciousness and its horrors, and you should go into silence. And it's almost as though one way that one can see this is that this is just a giant universally mandated retreat, spiritual retreat. Now, when I wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and after it was published, I had a lot of people say to me, I wish I could do what you did. Oh my God, I wish I could go to an ashram in India, and I wish I could practice meditation for hours a day, but I can't because I have all these things going on in the world. And so now sometimes I smile at people and say, here's your chance. And guess what? You don't even have to pay. It's free. People used to, I've paid money in my life to go in isolation. Now, when I say that, I also want to be mindful of the fact that many people are not in isolation. They feel trapped with the people who they're with their families, with their children, with their roommates. And that's an entirely different sort of psychological and spiritual challenge. But I think for me personally, I do best when I see everything that happens to me as an invitation for deepening my experience of life on earth, including all of its uncertainty. Mm-hmm. So that's been helping me a lot, is to see this as a spiritual invitation, rather than as a banishment.
I mean, it reminds me of in Big Magic, you talk about curiosity, and you talk about how curiosity is essential for creativity. And I was wondering how you feel curiosity can help us now at this moment.
I think curiosity can always help. And I'm going to give you the most extreme example, and I hope that it doesn't shock people, but I want to express it because I want to limit to how dire a circumstance can be where you can find your curiosity within that circumstance. Mm-hmm. And so the example that I'll give is that my partner, the love of my life, Rhea Elias, passed away almost 2 years ago, and it was almost 4 years ago that she was given a diagnosis of terminal pancreatic and liver cancer, and we were made to understand that there was no cure, there was no treatment, and that she was going to die. And we had 18 months before she died together. And I remember a conversation that she and I had, and I go back to it because I feel like we were really operating at the peak of ourselves in this conversation. Now, I want to make clear there were numerous times. I mean, this was also a harrowing experience. It was terrifying. It was awful. It was not that we were gliding on this state of bliss the entire time, but there was this moment where she said to me, I just finally got my life to where I felt good in my skin, where I felt like I really knew how to operate my life, where I felt like I had the people around me who I loved, where my creative juices were flowing, where I had the partner that I've always dreamed of having, where everything was working. And now they tell me that I'm going to die. And there was a long pause, and she said, "That's really interesting." "That's really interesting, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah." And then I said, "I just found the love of my life, the one person who I feel like I trust myself completely with, the partner that I've always dreamed of, the relationship, the friendship, the love that I've always sought. And now they tell me that she's going to die. That's really interesting." And we just sat there for this moment and like, this is wild. Like, what an interesting moment. And then we looked at each other and we said, how are we going to do this? And she's like, how am I going to die? And I was like, how am I going to live without you? This is fascinating. What an adventure. Like, it really did feel like that. It felt like at that moment, and I want to be clear, it doesn't always feel that way, but at that moment, it felt like this is the most interesting plot twist that this story could take. And how are we going to live in it? And I have a friend who's a minister who I love so much, and he always says, life is not a mystery to be solved. Life is a mystery to be lived in. And the question is now, how are you going to answer these mysterious questions of why do these things happen? Why do terrible things happen to good people? Why is there loss? Why do we lose each other? Why is there so much uncertainty? Because you'll never, ever, ever get that answer. But you can live inside of that question in a way of, this is fascinating experience. And having truly reached that point with Rhea, and having truly felt after she died, okay, so the one person who I always said I cannot live without is gone. That's interesting. That's interesting. How am I going to live my life forward into that space? And what does that open up? So apparently the universe thinks I can live without this person because they've taken this person away. So I'm going to live in agreement with with the universe's idea and say, I guess I can, but how? And that becomes the question that you live into. So I feel like once I've done that, I kind of feel like, bring it, and so I can really say, having done it, I can really say there's no experience in your life too harrowing that if you don't get very quiet, you can actually find the curiosity about, how are we going to do this? And I feel like that's the question the whole world is living in right now. Collecting a moment of great hardship for you, or it might be a moment of rest for you. Everyone is getting their different COVID experience, but without a doubt, it is objectively a very interesting moment to be alive.
Yeah, I'm 8 months pregnant at the moment, and it's really a difficult contradiction to contain. Where you're forced to live so completely in the present, but at the same time, you're kind of instinctually wanting to think about the future. So
Yeah.
Are you kind of having any kind of similar, difficulties containing the present contradictions, or your?
Well, yeah, because we also are humans who have enormous imaginations, limitless imaginations. And that is both our strength and our weakness. So our strength as humans is that we can imagine any world and into being, and we can create it. And what terrifies us and drives us into insanity and madness is that we can also imagine any world into being, you know? And so one of my favorite teachers is the spiritual teacher Byron Katie. And one of her lines that I love so much is, if you want to suffer, have a future. You know, because you will immediately start to suffer when you start to imagine the future. And so again, for you, you know, in your pregnancy, it's an extraordinary spiritual invitation to just keep coming back to what Thich Nhat Hanh says: present moment, perfect moment. Present moment, perfect moment. Are you fine right now? The chair is holding you. Your hand is holding your head. Everything is supported. You're like, everything is, your body is comfortable. You're safe. Your baby's okay. Present moment, perfect moment. You want to suffer? Now let's talk about the future.
Exactly.
You want to be okay? Come right back here. You know, and you know, that's the greatest central teaching of all wisdom is like, stay here and you'll be okay. And imagine what's coming, and ooh, you're going to take yourself on a ride into a very scary movie. But it's just a movie. It's just imagination. And it's really good to know the difference between a scary movie in your head that's imagination and reality. And reality is that right now you and your baby are perfectly fine. And that's the only reality that's true. The rest of it is just dreaming a scary movie for ourselves.
Yeah. I also heard you speaking about the difference between compassion and empathy. And I think that just really moved me, the distinction between those two. And I was wondering if you would share with the audience.
Yeah, and I'll say right off the bat, if you're interested in this idea, look into the work of a man named Matthew Ricard, Ricard. He's a French Tibetan Buddhist monk who has been called by many people the happiest man in the world. He spent a lifetime in deep meditation and deep contemplation, and he's a student of the Dalai Lama and a friend of the Dalai Lama. And whenever the Dalai Lama is approached by scientists who want to do research on the scientific benefits of meditation, he always points them to Matthew Ricard, and they always study him. He's been studied top to bottom because he has one of the quietest minds in the world from a lifetime of meditation. But what he speaks about, and the Dalai Lama is in agreement on it, is that we are taught that empathy is a good thing, that you should feel other people's suffering when they suffer. But what they've determined through a lifetime of contemplation and meditation is that, so the simplest way to explain it is, if you're suffering, Avni, and I'm not, so let's say something terrible is happening to you, but nothing terrible is happening to me. But I'm your friend, and I see you in pain. And that pain goes into my empathetic response system so deeply that I go into pain with you. What we have now are two people suffering and nobody who can help. So now we have two patients who need attendance with their mental health or their physical. Like, I'm going to shut down. If I go into your pain with you, I'm going to emotionally shut down, and then I can't be of any service to you. And so what he's taught, what Matthew Ricard has taught, and what the Dalai Lama teaches is that empathy is actually a sort of, can be a dangerous road to go down, over empathy. And they've been able to show it in brain scans. What happens to the body when you go into empathetic response is trauma. So if I go into empathetic response to your pain, I'm going to go into trauma. I'm going to release all my cortisols. I'm going to release all my stressors. My endorphins are going to go down. I'm going to go into a stress response, and my body won't be able to handle it, and then I'll crack, and I won't be able to serve. And so what he advises instead is compassion born of courage. And the courage means the courage to recognize that your suffering is not mine, right? And if I want to serve you, and I want to help you while you're in suffering and in pain, then I need to stay a little bit detached to be able to recognize that you're the one who's in pain, and how can I help you? And the metaphor he gives is, if you were a surgeon on the battlefield and you felt the pain of every person who was in pain, you would not last very long as a surgeon, and they wouldn't have a surgeon to help them. And so I've found that in my life too, when I've been there. There's a couple moments I can think of where I've been in crisis, and somebody in the room was able to hold their center well enough to be able to hold space for me to be in crisis without them entering into crisis with me. And I feel like at this time, especially because we all carry around in our pockets this magical device of a phone that we can see all of the world suffering at any time, and there's a great deal of it happening right now, we have to be very careful we have to be careful to stay in reality. Are you okay right now? Are you okay right now? Okay, so now you stay okay. And then from that place of being okay, you can make sober and sane choices about how and if you can be of service. One of the reasons that I left New York City, aside from my own safety, was because I'm not a first responder. I'm not a nurse or a doctor. I don't drive an EMT. I'm not any of the essential. I'm a novelist. Like I'm not going to be able to help. And one of the things I remembered learning after 9/11, I heard one of the firemen say, if you can't serve right now, we need you to step back. And so sometimes there's a point in your life where you have to be very realistic about the fact that the job right now is on the front lines of the people whose calling is to be of service. And if you're not one of them, step back and get out of the way. And don't stare at it until you become immobilized, traumatized, and defeated, where you can't take care of yourself and you can't take care of your family and the people who are immediately around you. And that's also why it's important, I think, at times like this, to sometimes take a media cleanse and just be like, I'm going to have a breakdown if I continue to absorb all of this that I cannot do anything about. So let me return to my center and return to my realm. Who in my immediate vicinity can I be of service to? And how can I actually help them so that we don't become another family who needs assistance? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Also, like, turn off the news and turn off
Yeah. Can you do anything about that? I mean, it's not about being cold and indifferent. It's about saying, I need to stay. This is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. And every one of us who can stay emotionally healthy and physically healthy, it will be a service to the world. So whatever you need to do to take care of that, you do that. And you have to be realistic about what your limitations are. Look, I couldn't solve the problems of the world 6 months ago before COVID, right? I certainly cannot solve it now. But I can take care of the people in my immediate vicinity, and I can make sure that I don't become another person who needs care.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to ask you a little bit about how are you writing now at all? And
almost. Almost. Yeah, I'm about to, I've got an idea for a book, and I can tell that it's time for me to start writing because every one of my closets has been cleaned and organized. My spices are alphabetized. My shoes are all pointing in the same direction. My basement and my attic have been cleaned out. My yard has been, like, I get these frenzies of cleaning right before I'm about to start a project, because I know that once I go into the project, all of that is going to be left. And so I feel like every few years between books, I do this just big Marie Kondo cleaning out of everything. And it's also kind of a cleansing of my mind that gets me in order. I think it's very similar to pregnant women nesting and getting the house, like getting the house perfect before the baby comes, because once the baby comes, the house is not going to be in order. Yeah, but I'm very soon to start writing. Yeah.
Okay, that's exciting. So this is actually maybe a really fruitful creative time for you in a sense.
Yeah, it will be. I can feel that it's going to be. Every single one of my whole life has been canceled. So, I might as well make something. I usually have a really big travel schedule and tour schedule and speaking schedule, and with the exception of doing the occasional Zoom thing like this, it's all been canceled. I've never had such an opportunity. I don't know when in my life again I will have especially when I just had 2 months in total solitude. I don't know when that will happen again. So so it's been it's been pretty fruitful. But I also just want to say that no one, I know there's a lot of creativity shaming going on. There's a lot of shaming going on subtly in social media, particularly about how you should be using this time. And I really should have prefaced all of my comments by saying, however you are getting through this is perfect. Whatever you are doing is perfect. You are not required to go, you're not required to use this as a spiritual retreat. You're not required to get in the best shape of your life. You're not required to write a novel at the end of this, to learn another language. Honestly, like, it may be for some people who were having a difficult time even before COVID. If you can just survive this, that's great. Like, that's all we need. That's all we need you to do. You know, like, there's nobody is required to increase their productivity during a time of great uncertainty.
I want to ask you about, so I'm very aware that this conversation is called From Eat, Pray, Love to City of Girls, although you've written so many other books, and we could really discuss all of them. We could discuss even, you know, you told me the last time we were together that you began, at the start of your career, you were writing a lot for men's magazines, which, you know, I don't think a lot of people probably know about you. So you've had a really fascinating career, but I would love to ask you about City of Girls, which is right here. Such a gorgeous cover and such a gorgeous book. I just finished it, and I wanted to ask you what sparked the novel.
Thank you for saying that you loved the cover. Sexually promiscuous women whose lives are not destroyed by their promiscuity. And I wanted to write this book very intentionally as a counter to the very tired old story of the ruined woman. And some of the greatest works of literature that the world has ever seen are stories of the ruined woman. Anna Karenina is, of course, primary among them, but there's also Madame Bovary, and there's Anna Christie, and there's great operas that have been written about the ruined woman. And the ruined woman is a woman who dared to be drawn in by sexual or sensual temptation, and her entire life as a result was destroyed, either by being cast out of society or being murdered or having to throw herself under the wheels of the train. And they're beautiful, beautiful works of art, and they're very dramatic. But as a female reader, I just get to the point where I'm like, can a woman have a sexually adventurous life and maybe not have to go under the wheels of the train? And what might that look like? And so City of Girls is entirely about that. It's about it's written in the form of a memoir from a woman in her 90s who is looking back at her very exciting life. She had moved to New York City in 1940 at the age of 19 and fallen in with a group of showgirls and singers and dancers and playboys and actors at the theater company where her aunt owned, and made some big mistakes and survived them. One of the other lessons that I want people to take away from this book is that women can survive their bad judgment. Women can survive their terrible mistakes. Like, if that were not true, there would barely be a woman left surviving in the world, right? Women can actually survive our terrible, terrible choices that we make in regards to love and sex. And we can not only learn to accept our younger selves and forgive our younger selves, but we can look back at our younger selves from an older age with a great deal of fondness and acceptance, rather than shame. So in a lot of ways, the book is about the end of shame.
That's so interesting. You know, I have to say, I read it as a book about female friendship.
Oh, it's that too. It's that too. That's the other theme.
I've actually never read a book, I think, that focuses so much on, I mean, I kind of saw the female friendships as the great catalysts of the book, as the kind of, you know, if you imagine every great romance has this love story, I thought that the female friendships were the great loves.
Yes, yes. Well done. Yes, it is that. It is that. And not dissimilar to me. my character, Vivian Morris, as she goes through her life, the foundational relationships of her life are her female friendships. And there are many of them, and they carry her through every season of her life. Yeah, it's definitely about that. There's a line in the book that I think, there are two lines in the book. There's one that people often quote as the central line of the book, which is Vivian saying, at some point in a woman's life, she gets tired of being ashamed all the time, and then she can become who she truly is. And I'm happy that that's the quote that people keep returning to. But there's another one that I feel like is a parallel, the most important line in the book. When she gets into her middle age and she has this group of female friends, and they all live in the same neighborhood in New York City, and they spend their summers, they're all working women, and they always meet at Vivian's apartment building, and they climb up on the roof in the summertime, and they share stories and wine and cigarettes, and years go by, and they just have this beautiful female bonding. And she says, it was on that rooftop during those summers in the 1950s that I learned this incredible fact, that when women are together with no men around, they don't have to be this thing or that thing. They can just be. They can just be. And that is something that I've learned in my life too. And I think now at the age of 50, I can say that, I don't want to say mistake because it was an innocent guess, but something that I did as a younger woman was I tried to find in men something that can only be found in women. I tried to find in one man something that can only be found in a group of women. You know, this way of being held in sisterhood, in acceptance, the attention that women give to each other, the loyalty, the devotion, all of that. Like, I was trying to find one guy who would provide that. and I've learned, like, no, I need that from my circle of like the 10 closest women in my life. That's where I get it.
Yeah. And I also felt that, you know, she's looking back at her life. She's actually kind of relating the story of her life to another younger woman. And through that process, I almost got the feeling like she was trying to impart a kind of wisdom, as you're saying. And I wondered, you know, could she have written, would the story have been the same had Vivian been younger? You know, I was imagining a woman maybe half of her age, looking back on her life and recounting every, you know, trick she's had, all the men, all the exciting sex that she had, you know, in the 1940s in New York. And I just thought that it's only now, as a much older woman, that she can really look back and take stock of the fact that those were is between two women. It is between her, maybe, and Edna. You know, Edna kind of cutting her down.
Yeah,
that really broke my heart.
Yeah, I know.
I had to take a picture and send it to friends. That you know, where Edna cuts her down.
Oof, it's so brutal. It's so brutal. And it's where Vivian's childhood ends, you know, where her innocence ends. I mean, she's been behaving in a way that doesn't look innocent because she's been running around having sex with all kinds of men, but she's an innocent. She doesn't know yet. All of us are innocents until we know how much harm we can cause others. You know, and that was when she realized how much harm she had caused somebody, not just anybody, but somebody who she loved, admired, and respected, and that she was not going to be forgiven. Mm-hmm. And I also think that one of the things that matures us is we all have things in our life that we have not been forgiven for. Maybe not everybody. Maybe some of you may have led more pure lives than me, but I know that I have people in my life who will cross the street when they see me coming with reason. And how do you live forward in a world where there are people who do not forgive you? That's the reason she had to be 90, because I think that it takes that long to achieve. I mean, I hope to get it sooner, but I feel like if you really want to meet us with every aspect of herself and every aspect of her being, she's not likely to be 28. you know. She's not likely to even be 35. She might be 60, you know, but she's gonna have a lot of gray hair, and she's going to have settled into herself. That I've spoken about this before, but I think that the really radical women's revolution that could happen, the one word that if women could embody it, it would be a true revolution. It would be the word relaxed. It's very difficult to find a relaxed woman anywhere in the world, but if you're going to find one, she's going to be old, and she's just life is going to have sanded her down, and there'll be this certain surrender that she's had into life on life's terms, and a recognition of like her own humanity and other people's humanity. And so that's why I felt like, that's why I had to set the book in the past, because I wanted to have enough decades to write into that by the time we get to the end, the woman who is writing those pages is a woman who is.
I have so many more questions for you. I want to talk about the fashion in the book. I want to talk about even the descriptions of the food. It's such a sensual, beautiful novel, and questions for you. So I'm going to move to some audience questions. Rachita Chauhan asks, lockdown has been introspective for most. Has the journey to find oneself changed post-COVID?
Well, we can't really travel to find ourselves anymore. I definitely could not do the Eat, Pray, Love journey this year, probably not next year. So how can I answer this? And there are people who will never be able to travel for economic reasons. There are people who will never be able to travel for psychological reasons, because it might just not be something that feels relaxing to them. When I went traveling for Eat, Pray, Love, there was my editor at GQ who I loved so much, and I came to tell him I was leaving my job to go on this adventure, and I told him what I was doing, and I said I was going to be spending 4 months in an ashram in India, and he said, "What do you do for 4 months in an ashram in India?" And I said, "You meditate from 4 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. You meditate, you chant, you pray, that's it." And he said, "Wow, there is a part of me that so wishes that I wanted to do that." But nothing in me wants to do that. I don't want to do that at all. I want to go out to dinner with my friends. This sounds horrible, but have fun. So I think that if it were the case that the only way that you could find yourself would be to travel, that the world would be an even more cruel place than it is. I once heard a TED talk given by a gentleman who had been in solitary confinement for many years. He was a multiple murderer, and he had finally gotten out of prison, but he had spent years in solitary confinement, and that's where he had his enlightenment experience. And he put it very beautifully. He said, "Solitary confinement is a terrible place to find yourself, but that's where I found myself." And I think, people have had enlightenment experiences and spiritual awakenings in prisons. They've had them in refugee camps. They've had them in hospital rooms. Awakening comes when it comes. My nature is of such a curious sort that travel has always suited me as a means of awakening and a means of seeing the world. But yeah, I don't get to do it now. So all of my spiritual practices, I'm actually meditating more than I have since I was in India at that ashram in the last 2 months. Praying more and doing more reading of sacred texts, more chanting. All of this is coming back now that I'm still. And there is that, I can't remember who said it, that you can't see your reflection in moving water. You can only see your reflection in still water. So yes, I would heartily agree. And I think most of the mystics and the muses would agree that actually solitary confinement is maybe the best place to find that still water and to go inward. And look, we don't even really have a choice right now. So it looks like this is the direction that we're all being pointed in.
Yeah, everyone should take advantage. Okay, so Vinita More asks, could relate to Eat, Pray, Love and loved it immensely. The movie did not bring out the same emotions as the book did. Did they consult you on how to bring about the essence of the feelings in your book?
I worked with them to a very limited extent, and here's my reasoning on that. I've had some experience selling work to Hollywood before, and the movie Coyote Ugly, not many people know this, but the movie Coyote Ugly was based on an article I wrote in GQ years ago about my experiences working at that bar. Yeah, so I did that one, and then I've had books be sold for options that they didn't end up making the movie. So here's what I've personally, people do this differently, but here's what I've learned. If you would like to have a peaceful and calm life, and Hollywood people come to you and say, we would like to buy your book, say, thank you very much. I will take your money. I love you. Goodbye. I'll see you at the premiere. And just let it go. Like my feeling is either sell it and walk away, or don't sell it, because all of us know that the movie is never the same as the book. And what I think is the only thing that I think is shocking about that is that people still get shocked by that. Yeah. Because, I see artists and writers who sell their work to Hollywood, and then they're so upset by the movie being they're like, they ruined it in the movie. And I always want to say, have you never seen a movie based on a book? Like, how many movies can we really think of that really captured this very difficult thing to do? And it's not like anyone ever sets out when making a movie out of a book to do it wrong. Like, everyone's intention is the purest, and the people who made that film, I can genuinely tell you, like, their intention was the purest. And there are some readers who did feel like the movie captured it. And there are some readers who came to the book because they saw the movie first and they'd never even knew there was a book, and then they came to the book from there. So there's a symbiotic relationship, but I never expect that they're meant to be the same thing. They're completely different art forms. I had the luxury of 350 pages and total control to be able to evoke whatever I wanted to evoke. That director had less than 2 hours, a cast of hundreds, to try to do the same thing. It's not the easiest thing in the world. So I feel like, yeah, so I had very little to do. They let me read the script, and unless there was something that I thought was just egregiously factually incorrect, my general attitude is, I think that's great. You guys go ahead and do it, whatever you want to do. I'll see you at the premiere, and thank you so much for allowing me to be able to buy a house. I'm really genuinely grateful for that. I'm sitting in the house that I was able to buy because of that movie, and that's no small thing. I'm not even saying that jokingly. It's like, I have a shelter for myself, and that's a direct result of that. And I'm so grateful that I could never complain or judge. I also have no judgment. I have no critical judgment of the movie. I'm way too close to it. So for me, I just think it's amazing and hilarious and magical that it happened, and that one of the first lines of the movie is Julia Roberts walking in Indonesia to the medicine man and saying to him, "Hi, my name's Liz Gilbert." And I laugh every time I see it. I'm like, no, it's not. You're Julia Roberts. That's literally insane. But the nice thing is, when a movie, like, for instance, my favorite book is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. And I saw the play on Broadway and I saw the BBC movie, and I didn't think either of them did to me what that book did to me. But the really good thing is you can always go back and read the book. It's not like it's gone anywhere.
Okay, so the next question. Okay, so this one is about City of Girls. How you introduced Edna, the description of her entire person, almost like you had a picture in front of you. How do you put together that kinds of image? Is it a drawing in your head? Do you use photographic references or physical sketches? So for me, I did probably 4 years of research before I started writing the book. And what I've found as a novelist is that it's in the research that the characters come to life. I had none of them in my head. I just knew frivolous, innocent girl goes to New York, theater company. I had Aunt Peg in my head because she's very similar to my Aunt Lolly. And so I did have a model for her, but I didn't have a model for anybody else. But what I did was I spent years just reading everything about New York City theater in the 1940s, reading New Yorker reviews of plays that were
popular in 1941, plays that you and I would have never heard of, but they were a hit that season. Descriptions and profiles of the actresses, and journals from playwrights who were writing during that time, letters between playwrights and authors, going to the New York Public Library theater division and just sitting and reading. It's so much material. And slowly what starts to happen is that in that reading, people start to come to me, and they're an amalgam of lots of different descriptions. But I will say that if any of you are readers and oh wait, I can't believe I'm having trouble coming up with her name right now. She wrote The Goldfinch, Donna Tartt. So Donna Tartt is an acquaintance of mine, and she is the most stylish woman I have ever seen in my entire life. She has such a particular style, and she's very petite, and she always wears suits, and she has this sharp bob, and she is always the most astonishingly well-dressed person in the room. And it's not like anybody else's style, and it's masculine, but she looks boyish. And so my descriptions of Edna Parker are very similar to, if you look at pictures of Donna Tartt, you'll see that they're related. And the only person who caught that was my friend Ann Patchett, who's very good friends with Donna Tartt. And she sent me an email after she read the book, and she said, "Did you base Edna's fashion style on Donna Tartt?" And I said, "Yes, I did." But her character is not Donna's character. So it's, all of these characters are sort of pieced together from various different inspirations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just loved the pages of like the fashion, like the aesthetic descriptions, and they were really amazing. Samantha asks, what do authors read during this time? What are some meditative spiritual books that you recommend?
Well, I'll go back to my favorite spiritual teacher, who has probably changed my life more than anybody, is a woman named Byron Katie. And she's got a number of books. One is called Who Would You Be Without Your Story? I would recommend that one. That's a very good one. Who Would You Be Without Your Story? Another one, The Mind at Home with Itself is another one. She's an extraordinary teacher, but I would even more recommend getting on YouTube and watching her work with people. Because what she does is this really simple, it's kind of perfect Zen. She does this very simple work that she calls the work or inquiry, where she will ask you to sit with your most stressful belief, and you'll narrow it down to one sentence. And then it's a meditation where she just asks you these 4 questions. And the 4 questions are, is it true? Can you absolutely know that it's true? How do you react when you believe that it's true? And who would you be without that belief? And it's deceptively very simple. It's very deep meditative work. I never do that practice that I don't come away feeling absolutely restored into peace and presence. So yeah, I would advise going on a Byron Katie bender. And actually she's teaching, if you go to her website, byronkatie.com, and it's spelled Byron, B-Y-R-O-N, she's very generously teaching workshops every week during the weekdays. And you can sign on to them and watch her do the work with people, which is really beautiful. So yeah, she's been a touchstone for me, not just during this, but always. I really feel like I was able to walk through the shadow, the valley of Rhea's death with so much more grace because of the Byron Katie work that I've done in my life and that I continue to do.
Wow. Well, Liz, you've been so amazing. And I don't know, I think you've really helped, like you've helped me. I'm sure you've helped so many of the listeners, even just reframe the way we're thinking about the moment, the current moment that we all find ourselves in. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Elizabeth Gilbert. Thank you, Avni, for that wonderful session. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we'll log back on at 8:30 p.m. for our next JLF Brave New World session of Redux, The Seed of Compassion. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, in conversation with Peak Wire. See you at 8:30 p.m.